beginning, before the apocalypse, before the undead horror, monsters and bioweapons, before Raccoon City and Umbrella, existed something much older, hidden deep within the earth, and long before human history lived an ancient evil, a microscopic organism, old, resilient, waiting. Early civilizations encountered it unknowingly through rare plants, strange rituals, and isolated communities. Most who came into contact with it died quietly. A very small number survived, and in surviving, they have changed, evolved. Centuries and millenniums would pass as the virus endured. The eventual discovery of this buried secret, accompanied by human malice and ambition, would set about a catastrophic series of events that will poise to topple the world. Dim the lights, take a slow breath, and relax your shoulders. Tonight, let's step back in time and uncover the secrets of the curious and rotting world of Resident Evil, one of my favorite settings. Try to imagine going beyond your surroundings and into the odd comfort of dark hallways and abandoned mansions. If you enjoy these narrations or are a general fan of horror, please feel free to like and subscribe, as I will continue to create these based on horror franchises that inspire me. Though this video will cover as much as I can, this will focus mainly on the video game entries, as I do not find the character writing to be good in the CGI films. But for now, sit back and relax as we peel away the secrets of Resident Evil. At the heart of Umbrella were three men. One sought knowledge, one sought control, and one sought immortality. Oswell E. Spencer, aristocrat and visionary, believed humanity was flawed, weak, diseased by imperfection. He dreamed not of curing illness, but of replacing humanity with something superior. James Marcus dreamed only of science itself, of understanding life by dismantling it. Everything outside of it, including his human test subjects, are expendable. And Edward Ashford, brilliant and doomed, the most restrained of the three, focused on scientific progress rather than domination. In the late 1960s, in a remote region of West Africa, they would come into contact with the progenitor virus. Beneath the earth, hidden within the remains of a forgotten civilization, lay a peculiar flowering organism, later named the Stairway of the Sun. From samples taken from the ancient plant, the foundations of the progenitor virus were formed. It was unstable, lethal to most test subjects, and utterly uncontrollable. Yet Spencer persisted. Death, to him, was merely statistics. By 1968, the three men founded a pharmaceutical front, a corporation designed to mask something far darker beneath polite branding and sterile laboratories. It was called the Umbrella Corporation. Umbrella expanded rapidly, constructing research facilities across the globe. Publicly, it produced vaccines, medical treatments, and relief supplies. Privately, it conducted human experimentation on a scale unseen in modern history. By the late 1970s, Umbrella's research had diverged into competing visions. Ashford's legacy centered on lineage and preservation. Marcus pursued pure science. Spencer began quietly planning something else entirely. Enter Raccoon City. Umbrella's first great testing ground was hidden in the forests outside this quiet Midwestern city. The Arklay Mountains were thick with pine and mist, their roads rarely travelled, their caverns deep enough to swallow secrets whole. Beneath them, Umbrella constructed a sprawling underground laboratory, part research facility, part mass grave waiting to happen. It was here that Umbrella refined a new strain derived from Progenitor, a virus that was cheaper, more adaptable, and infinitely more violent. They called it the T-virus. The T-virus did not improve humanity, it erased it, then rebuilt the remains into something obedient. Test subjects exhibited necrosis, brain death, and uncontrollable aggression. Motor function returned after clinical death. Pain responses vanished. What remained was hunger, persistence, and silence. To Umbrella, these were successes. Two men rose rapidly within this environment. One was William Birkin, a brilliant but obsessive researcher whose work would later fracture the world itself. The other was Albert Wesker, a man whose loyalty to Umbrella was carefully performed, never genuine. It happened faster than anyone expected. A containment failure, a murdered scientist, a desperate act of revenge. James Marcus, one of the co-founders of Umbrella, was betrayed and killed by operatives under Spencer's orders. But he did not die cleanly. He returned, his consciousness preserved within leeches altered by the T-virus. In his madness, he released death into the facility. The virus spread through ventilation shafts and water lines. Researchers became walking corpses. Security teams vanished. Test subjects escaped into the forest. By the time Umbrella realized what they had lost control of, the mountains were already whispering with hunger. Strange murders began to occur on the outskirts of Raccoon City, bodies torn apart, reports of animals behaving violently, unnaturally. An outbreak erupts in Umbrella's remote training facility, linked by rail to the Arkley complex. Records were corrupted, personnel logs ended mid-sentence, test subjects roam free. This incident is chronicled in Resident Evil Zero, where rookie medic Rebecca Chambers, along with inmate Billy Cohen, witnesses Umbrella's cruelty firsthand. This was not an accident. It was the return of James Marcus. Now pseudo-reborn as Queen Leech, Marcus enacted a deliberate release of the T-virus across Umbrella facilities, using automated systems and long-forgotten access codes. His revenge was not loud. It was patient. Rebecca and Billy would triumph over the corrupted abomination and live another day. Stars. The Special Tactics and Rescue Service are an elite police officers trained for extreme situations. These heroes are sent to investigate and rescue the Bravo team from the Arklay Mountains. They found an abandoned mansion. What they found inside would rewrite the meaning of fear. Thus begins the tragedy of Resident Evil 1 and of the survival horror. The mansion was a lie built of elegance and rot, grand halls hiding laboratories, art concealing death traps. Quiet, but curiously felt aware. One by one, officers were hunted by creatures that should not exist, reanimated dead, shambling and silent. Dogs whose flesh hung loose from bone, living weapons grown in tanks and cages. Among the survivors were Jill Valentine and Chris Redfield, ordinary people forced into extraordinary terror. As the team uncovers hidden passages and underground laboratories, the truth rots into view. The mansion is a testing ground for a virus created by Umbrella Corporation. Experiments failed, containment collapsed, and the staff were left to die, or worse. betrayal sharpens the horror. Albert Wesker, the team's captain, reveals himself as part of the conspiracy, manipulating the survivors as data points rather than people. Loyalty is exposed as an illusion, and survival becomes an act of defiance rather than heroism. The mansion exploded in flame. Its destruction meant to bury the truth, but the horror had already escaped, its shadowy traces leading into the city. Raccoon City did not fall all at once. It sickened, with the T-virus spreading through water systems. Throughout August of 1998, hospitals reported unexplained fevers. Emergency rooms filled with patients suffering violent delirium and sudden organ failure. Umbrella quietly redirected supplies, bribed officials, and falsified autopsy reports. To the public, it was blamed on polluted water flowing from the Arklay Mountains. The water was contaminated. The dead began to rise quietly. At first, police treated incidents as drug-induced psychosis. Officers disappeared during routine calls. Then entire precincts went silent. Firearms proved ineffective. Communication collapsed. Then, the catalyst for pandemonium. On September 23, 1998, Umbrella's special forces stormed William Birkin's laboratory for his G-virus research. The encounter turned into catastrophe. As the attackers fled, a damaged container of T-virus shattered in the sewer system. Rats carried the infection upward. Water carried it outward, poisoning the entire water reservoir of Raccoon City. On the night of the same day, 2 outsiders arrived in the city. By this time, Raccoon City is already a living nightmare. Thus begins the parallel nightmare of Resident Evil 2. Leon S. Kennedy, a rookie officer on his first day, arrives expecting order and finds only ruin. His search for survivors leads him deeper into the city's decay and into the orbit of Ada Wong, a woman wrapped in secrets. She presents herself as another victim, but every step she takes is guided by ulterior motives. In a city where trust is lethal, Ada is the quiet reminder that some predators still look human. Claire Redfield follows a parallel path, driven by the hope of finding her brother. Instead, she finds Sherry Birkin, a frightened child being hunted not for survival, but for what she carries inside her. Sherry's existence exposes the cruelest truth of the outbreak. Innocence was never protected. It was exploited. The once proud police station becomes a maze of death, repurposed by desperation and fear. Beneath the city, secret laboratories reveal the true horror. The outbreak was engineered, perfected, and unleashed without remorse. Umbrella Corporation's experiments blur the line between science and torture, birthing monsters that are both horrific and relentless. Meanwhile, Jill Valentine, already scarred by the mansion incident, wakes to a city that wants her dead. Not just the monsters, but Umbrella Corporation itself hunts her, unleashing the Nemesis, a relentless weapon built to exterminate survivors who know too much. It does not stalk out of instinct, but is programmed to erase witnesses. These events are chronicled in Resident Evil 3. Amid the chaos, Jill crosses paths with Carlos Oliveira, a mercenary sent in as part of a disposable cleanup crew. Unlike Umbrella, Carlos still believes saving lives matters. As the city collapses, he risks himself to save Jill, even as he realizes his mission was never rescue. It was silence. Infection, betrayal, and exhaustion blur together as Raccoon City is deliberately condemned. The government responds with annihilation. Raccoon City is erased in nuclear fire. The world called it an accident, while Umbrella called it a tragedy. But only the dead knew the truth. In the months that followed the sterilization, survivors surfaced across the world, carrying fragments of evidence, testimonies, and scars that refused to fade. For the first time, Umbrella's carefully constructed silence began to fracture. In 2003, the Umbrella Corporation was formally dissolved following a massive class action lawsuit. Its assets were seized. Its name became synonymous with bioterror. But the corporation did not collapse quickly. Beneath the surface, the work continued. Evil has resisted. Far from America, in the cold, dark isolation of Antarctica, the legacy of Edward Ashford quietly lingered. The Ashford family believed themselves superior, genetically, intellectually, culturally. Their obsession culminated in the T. veronica virus, a strain designed not only to enhance, but to preserve consciousness. It failed. Then it succeeded. Too well. Alexia Ashford, infected deliberately, placed herself into cryogenic sleep to allow the virus to rewrite her completely. When she awakened years later, she was no longer human in any meaningful sense. She was intelligence without mercy, evolution without restraint. Her brother, Alfred Ashford, ruled their decaying facilities in madness, clinging to the past while Umbrella's present crumbled. These events are chronicled in Resident Evil Code Veronica. When Chris Redfield and Claire Redfield infiltrated these facilities in search of answers, they found only darkness and rot. Alexia and Alfred's deaths marked the symbolic end of Umbrella's founding families. The old bloodlines were gone, but their ambition, however, remained. If Umbrella was the architect of the nightmare, Albert Wesker was its inheritor. Created as part of Spencer's eugenics project, Wesker had never lived a natural life. Enhanced by experimental viruses and guided by Spencer's abandoned ideology, Wesker began manipulating outbreaks from the shadows. He betrayed allies without hesitation, manipulated outbreaks to test new strains, and pursued godhood with calm patience. To him, humanity was already dead, walking blindly toward extinction. He merely intended to decide what came next. In August 2006, Wesker tracked down his former mentor, Oswell E. Spencer, in a decaying European estate. Spencer spoke of a future shaped by superior beings. Wesker ended the conversation with violence and left Spencer with a hole through his chest. The last architect of Umbrella died alone, convinced he had been right. Umbrella and their founders are dead, but the virus is not, and the work still lives on. In the vacuum left behind, something worse begins to grow. Not a corporation, an ideology without orders. In 2004, a new kind of attack emerged. Deliberate, targeted, and curiously theatrical. Rural villages vanished overnight. Airports shut down without explanation. News footage showed cities under quarantine, soldiers in sealed suits, and civilians begging behind barricades. One of the first major incidents occurred in a remote rural region of Spain, where a parasitic organism buried beneath the earth for centuries resurfaced. It was called Las Plagas. Unlike the viruses before it, Las Plagas did not kill its host outright. It controlled them. Speech remained. Memory lingered. Obedience was absolute. The outbreak was orchestrated by Osmond Sadler, a cult leader who believed control was salvation. Aided by Ramon Salazar, they lured their followers by influence. The villagers did not scream as they turned. They welcomed it. The incident was contained, barely, by Leon Kennedy, now a government agent, hardened by years of silence, loss, and undergoing extreme training under Jack Krauser. This is chronicled in my personal favorite, Resident Evil 4. Sent to a remote European village, Leon Kennedy is tasked with rescuing the president's daughter, Ashley Graham. But what he finds is a place already hollowed out, its people stripped of free will and reshaped into obedient husks. The villagers are not mindless undead. They watch, speak, and hunt with cruel purpose, bound by a parasitic faith spread by the cult Los Iluminados. Leon's path repeatedly crosses with Ada Wong, a ghost from his past who moves through the nightmare untouched by faith or fear. She operates in the margins, chasing secrets and samples, never fully ally nor enemy. Her presence reinforces the cruel truth. Even in hell, there are those willing to profit. The cult's deception begins to unravel through Luis Serra, a disgraced researcher burdened by guilt. Once complicit in the parasite's spread, Luis now tries to undo his work, knowing redemption is unlikely. Castles echo with ritualized violence, laboratories hum with quiet cruelty, and ancient ruins hide modern atrocities. Leon survives, the parasite is destroyed, and the cult collapses. But the victory feels fragile. The horror here did not spread by accident. It spread because people chose to believe. And belief, once weaponized, is far harder to kill than any monster. By the mid-2000s, bioorganic weapons were no longer used in secrecy. They were deployed in war zones, tested in failed states, and unleashed as acts of terror meant to destabilize entire regions. In 2004, the United States formed a new countermeasure organization, BSAA, the Bioterrorism Security Assessment Alliance. Its mission was containment. Its reality was constant failure. That same year, Chris Redfield and Sheva Alomar were deployed to the African region, where Umbrella's original sin had begun. This story is chronicled in Resident Evil 5. There, they uncovered the truth Spencer had hidden for decades. The progenitor virus had never been destroyed. It had been guarded. Wesker intended to use it to force humanity into evolution through extinction. His plan was not conquest, it was selection. In the ruins of ancient civilizations and burning oil fields, Wesker was finally stopped. His death was violent, unceremonious, and long overdue. But his ideology survived him. It always had. By the end of the decade, the world had changed permanently. Airports screened for symptoms instead of weapons. Cities trained civilians in evacuation protocols. Entire regions were written off as unsalvageable. News anchors spoke calmly about outbreaks the way they once spoke about weather. People learned to live with the knowledge that extinction was no longer theoretical. It was logistical. By the time the fractured events of Resident Evil 6 commences, the world had already been dying. Fear spreads faster than any virus, and governments collapse under the weight of their own secrets. Resident Evil 6 unfolds as a global nightmare, told through intersecting campaigns that reveal how deeply humanity has lost control of its creations. In the American city of Tall Oaks, bioterrorism struck at the highest level. A coordinated outbreak using a new virus strain, the C virus, tore through civilians and government officials alike. Among the survivors was Leon S. Kennedy, forced to confront the realization that containment was now a political illusion. The C virus did not merely reanimate the dead, it adapted. Mutations occurred in real time. Hosts evolved mid-conflict, reshaping limbs and organs as needed. The virus was no longer a weapon with rules. It was a conversation between flesh and fear. Behind the outbreak stood Derek C. Simmons, a man obsessed not with evolution, but with legacy. His actions revealed a truth the world had avoided. Bioterror was now driven by personal obsession, not ideology. Umbrella's sins had become human. On another front, the BSAA expanded its authority, becoming less an emergency force and more a standing army. Soldiers trained not to save cities, but to decide which ones were worth saving. Veterans like Chris Redfield began to show signs of collapse. Scarred by loss and driven by guilt, Chris leads his soldiers through devastated battlefields where entire nations fall in hours. The work never ended, the victories never lasted, and the faces of the infected never stopped looking human. The conflict takes a more personal turn with Jake Muller, a mercenary hunted across continents. His story with Sherry Birkin expands through multiple locations and timelines. Jake carries a horrifying legacy. He is the son of Albert Wesker, the architect of countless atrocities. His blood holds the key to a cure, turning him into both salvation and prey. Survival for Jake is not about heroism. It is about outrunning the sins written into his DNA. You can take the boy out of Umbrella, but you can't take the umbrella out of the boy. Lurking behind every disaster is Ada Wong, moving unseen through the chaos. Manipulated, framed, and hunted, Ada uncovers the true mastermind, a man obsessed with equality through suffering, determined to infect the entire world. Her path reveals how easily identity, loyalty, and truth can be twisted in the dark. At its heart, these events are not just about monsters. It is about control, guilt, and the illusion that humanity can wield power without consequence. The virus changes forms, names, and hosts, but the result is always the same. Cities burn, bodies pile up, and survivors are left asking whether the world deserves saving at all. When the smoke clears, nothing feels victorious. Evil is not defeated, only delayed, and the darkness waits, patient for the next mistake. Years later, in the forgotten corners of rural America, something new emerged. Not a virus, a fungus. The mold, discovered and weaponized, did not merely infect, it rewrote identity. Memories fractured, personalities dissolved, bodies reshaped themselves into grotesque approximations of life. Victims became families of shared consciousness, bound to a central will. It was quieter than previous outbreaks, more intimate, and far more invasive. Long before Umbrella, long before laboratories, corporations, and courtrooms, there was the village. Hidden deep within a remote, snowbound region of Eastern Europe stood a settlement that did not appear on maps. It had endured wars, empires, and pandemics by remaining unseen. Its people lived by ritual, memory, and fear passed carefully from one generation to the next. Centuries earlier, a European woman named Mother Miranda encountered the mold after the death of her child. Where others saw horror, she saw resurrection. She devoted her life, and countless others, to it. By the early 20th century, her research drew the attention of Oswell Spencer himself. It was Miranda who inspired his obsession with transcendence. Umbrella's ideology did not begin in a boardroom. It began here. Enter the story of Ethan Winters, of renewed horror, familial bonds, and sacrifice. The next section will follow the events of Resident Evil 7 and 8, or otherwise known as Village. These are the latest games I've played and loved deeply, so I will go into this with more details. For decades, global bioterrorism has followed a familiar pattern. Corporations engineer weapons, weapons escape containment, and civilians pay the price. What makes the Baker incident different is not scale, but intimacy. This is not a city-wide infection. It is not war. It is a single family in a single house, destroyed by a single experiment. At the center of this experiment is the new bioweapon, the mold, created by a criminal organization known as the Connections. Unlike viruses such as T or G, the mold is fungal in structure and able to reconstruct damaged tissue. Evelyn, also known as E-001, was engineered to appear as a human child. Her instinct was not mass destruction. Her instinct was assimilation through emotional dependency. Evelyn infects hosts with the mold and then forces a psychological state resembling familial attachment. Infected individuals become loyal, protective, and violent toward perceived threats. However, Evelyn was unstable. Her mind was frozen in a childlike emotional state, unable to distinguish love from ownership. When the transport ship carrying Evelyn was damaged, she escaped with Mia Winters, her assigned handler. Evelyn's influence spread quickly. The Bakers found her wandering and took her in. This act sealed their fate. Curiously, each Baker family member exhibits a different stage of mold control. With the exception of Zoe, I'm not able to find resources as to why, but Jack Baker retains intelligence but loses empathy, becoming violent and obsessive. Marguerite Baker suffers extreme mutation driven by paranoia and maternal fixation. Lucas Baker retains self-awareness but embraces cruelty, using the mold to indulge his sadism. Zoe Baker resists full control, maintaining clarity but remaining infected. This is due to her never having consumed the mold. The mold does not simply mutate bodies, it amplifies existing psychological traits. The Bakers are not villains, they are overwritten people. Ethan Winters arrives with no combat training, no biological enhancements, and no understanding of bioterrorism, only his will to find his wife. Revealed as a plot twist of Resident Evil Village, he is actually killed by Jack Baker early in his search. This moment is critical. The mold reconstructs Ethan's body, perfectly restoring physical function while preserving his consciousness. Ethan continues living, unaware of his death. This makes him unique. Fully mold-based physiology. No centralized control link. Independent free will. Ethan is not Evelyn's servant. He is an anomaly. Ethan had to survive and prevail among the Baker family's violence. Eventually, he had to make a choice between his wife, Mia Winters, and his confidant forged through survival, Zoe Baker. Following the canon events of the game, Ethan chooses his wife, and they proceed to go into the heart of the Abyss, the ship that carried both Evelyn and Mia. Danger stalked every dark corridor. Amid broken lights, cut and live wires, and the marine horror of the ship, Ethan steps ever so closer to the heart of corruption. When Evelyn is finally confronted, she is no longer a child. She has aged rapidly, her biological clock destabilized. Her defeat is not explosive or triumphant. It is quiet. Evelyn dies, frightened and alone. With her death, the mold grew uncontrollable and tried to take Ethan with it. With the help of returning hero Chris Redfield, they triumphed in a final battle for survival. And Ethan leaves Louisiana, still infected, but stable. Resident Evil Village reveals the origin of the mold. Centuries earlier, a woman named Miranda discovered the fungal organism in a remote European village. Unlike Evelyn, Miranda was not engineered. She chose this power. After losing her daughter to influenza, Miranda dedicated her life to resurrection through mold-compatible hosts. She founded a cult, and she waited. In the events of Village, Mia Winters is brutally attacked and executed by Chris Redfield. In darker turn of events, Ethan's daughter, Rosemary, is kidnapped and now lost in a village, with its demonic hosts trying to get their hands on Rose for different reasons. Rosemary Winters is born from two mold-affected parents, Mia and Ethan. This makes her genetically stable, naturally integrated, uniquely adaptable. Miranda sees Rose not as a child, but as a vessel. Chris Redfield's apparent betrayal is a containment operation meant to remove Miranda's infiltration, as she has disguised herself as Mia. The damage, however, is irreversible. Each Lord represents a flawed path to mold-based evolution. Alcina Dimitrescu, regeneration paired with uncontrollable blood dependency. Donna Beneviento, psychological dominance without physical resilience. Salvatore Moreau, physical mutation without mental stability. Carl Heisenberg, free will combined with incompatible mutation. None are suitable. Only Rose qualifies. The Winters incident ends quietly. No global outbreak, no headlines, only records sealed and files buried. But its implications are profound. Ethan Winters proves that humanity is not defined by biology, but by choice. And Rosemary Winters walks into a future shaped by sacrifice she may never fully understand. The mold is gone, but its question remains. If something inhuman can love, can sacrifice, and can choose, what does that make it? Rosemary Winters has never known peace. Not because the world is loud, but because it is quiet in the wrong places. She is different. Not visibly, not immediately, but beneath her skin, something listens. Teachers whisper, classmates stare, mirrors feel unfamiliar. Rose knows what she is because the world reminds her constantly. A child born from the mold. And no matter how carefully the truth is hidden, it always finds its way back to her. There is a rumor, a consciousness preserved within the remnants of the mold, a place where memories are not remembered, but lived. They tell Rose that inside this place her power can be removed, that she can be normal. And so she agrees, not out of hope, but out of exhaustion. The mold is not dead. It has only changed its shape. The megamycete is a graveyard of thoughts, a fungal archive of pain, fear, and desire. When Rose enters it, the world reshapes itself around her memories. The village returns, not as it was, but as it felt. Hallways stretch too long, rooms breathe, whispers know her name. This place does not attack immediately, it watches. She appears again, Evelyn, still a child, still smiling, still cruel. She mocks Rose, not as an enemy, but as a reminder. You're just like me. Evelyn does not want to kill Rose. She wants her to accept what she is. Because the mold does not create monsters, it reveals them. Or so Evelyn believes. Then, something else speaks. Not loud, not commanding, familiar. Ethan Winters, or what remains of him. A memory, a residue, a will etched into the mold. He does not guide Rose with instructions, he reassures her with presence. Where Evelyn insists destiny is fixed, Ethan insists on choice. The megamycete tests Rose. It turns doubt into pursuit. A creature forms, tall, broken, relentless. It speaks with the voices of others, voices that judged her, feared her. This is not a monster meant to kill her, it is meant to make her run, to remind her that fear has always followed. And Rose does run, until she doesn't. Something changes. Rose stops trying to erase herself. She uses the mold not as a curse, but as a tool. Not domination, not control, balance. The mold responds, not violently, but obediently. For the first time, it is not shaping her. She is shaping it. At the heart of the megamycete, the truth waits. Rose can let go of her power. She can forget. She can be normal. But normal means losing what remains of her father. His voice fades as the mold weakens, and Rose understands something essential. Power is not the problem. Fear is. She chooses to keep herself whole and unchanged. Ethan does not stay. He was never meant to. He is a memory given form by love, and love does not linger. He says goodbye, not as a soldier, not as a hero, but as a father. And then he is gone, quietly, without ceremony. Rose wakes. The world is the same. She is still different, but the difference no longer defines her. The shadows remain, but they are behind her now. And somewhere, deep beneath the earth, the mold finally falls silent. Not defeated, but understood. Thus concludes the events of the Resident Evil games. I am very excited for the next installation of Resident Evil Requiem, pretty much the inspiration for this video. I will keep the background audio running for us sleepers. Good night. May you find yourself in the comfort of long, dark corridors and abandoned mansions.